Okay, so UV editor, UV editing, UV layouts, that's kind of the topic of conversation for this little video. What is a UV layout? UV layout basically is all the polygons of a character or a model kind of filleted out in kind of the cleanest form. If you're doing like a image-based mapping, then this works with any kind of material really. So if I were to put a material on something and it's just not adding up right, some of you may ran into problems with that with the rings and had to kind of turn the UV maps to match the rings of the planets. This kind of works the same way, especially with any kind of like, say I wanted to create an image-based material for this character here, I would need to be able to fillet all these polygons out so I could bring it into a second party program and add the stuff to it like Photoshop, be able to paint the face and everything like that. You can all look at these examples online, how, how these characters are all laid out. Some are better than others. So you've probably seen me open up the UV editor and kind of turn them here and there. I usually just go to the UV editor and open up the actual editor itself, and this gives me a grid here. If I got a box in there, it fillets the box out to 6 sides, and it's always going to keep things in this one box coordinate here. The reason why it's called UV is because basically XYZ is kind of taken up, so UV is the 2D representation of the actual model. So this is a very simple object right here. There's a new way I've been kind of working lately though, is I've been going over here to the UV editing tab and just bringing that up. That way I have a kind of a split working screen. I don't have this floating. And you also got a UV toolkit over here, which got all your stuff you can use, which I usually just end up going up here anyway. The big terms, the kind of stuff I start using: cut and sew, move and sew, layout, and unfold. I really hardly use any of this other stuff. Cutting and sewing works exactly like you'd think it would. Think it like a piece of cloth. You can actually cut these edges out. If you notice, I'm selecting the edges here. It's also selecting there, just to get a closer look. Say if I have an image applied here and I want to apply an image, I'm just going to add this checker image so I can kind of demonstrate. And you see you can actually right click in here, UV shell. This whole thing is a shell now. So it's like you can move this and it alters it, and if I were to have an image on here, it would be stretching it like the UVs are representing there in the checkerboard right there. You can use the scale here. You can scale it down to make the UVs, make the image really big on the actual model. And you can cut pieces away and re-sew them back in certain ways. Turn this off right there. So in other words, if you notice I'm scrolling over here, I'm in edge mode. If I'm scrolling over here, it's selecting the edges, but it's also selecting the coinciding edge to it. In other words, that's where it would be created at, or would be connected. So if I had an image running on this side, running from the top of it, it would actually be running like this right here. Now if I wanted to take this screen basically in Photoshop and be able to manipulate it, I could like this, or if I wanted to have these things connected here, or cut this one face away and move it to a different part of the screen, you could actually cut this out. So if I went to right here, I just went to cut it away, now it becomes basically its own shell. You can move this around over here. This is its own shell. And if this was an intricate object and had more polygons on it, you could actually go to unfold and it would fillet it out even more in a more timely fashion, whatever Maya thinks is the best way. Then you could go layout and it would lay it back in the grid in the cleanest way. Obviously that's too big. them back together. There's different ways you can project onto these geometry. You have automatic, which is basically kind of what it's doing now. Let me see. I think automatically actually will rip the faces apart. Yep. It stacks them differently. And it actually created a shell out of each single one of them. You can go about and realign these things to how you want to. What if I did, there's not one for a box. Planar kind of works for the box though. I had deleted this object and I have a cylinder. Now this is just laying it in here. This is with no projection on it. Basically, I would go and they actually have a cylindrical map for it. It's come with this like handles. Let me put my checker in and you can kind of see what it's doing. So now you can kind of basically manipulate the handles. Oh, I don't want to scale the object. I want to scale the shell. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I would always go to the bounding box up or to the selection box and see what they got on here. Insert projection before doing. Okay. Honestly, with the cylinder, you know, if I wanted to make the checkerboard, the checker bigger up top there, say if I have a stretched image and I don't mind it being stretched like that, but then I wanted my image to be really small here, and I'll actually apply something to there so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Let me take this off. Get a assign new material. I'm just going to create a Lambert. A Lambert node over here. I'm going to add a file. Image. Yeah, this rain texture that I had from a previous project. Press 6. So now you can see here how it's altering the image from one to another, and it's good to kind of like break these things up because you can make, especially if you have coinciding faces and you need to kind of like make them all kind of work the same, be the same size, in other words. And that's what good is for the checkerboard, because you can kind of go ahead and do that with the checkerboard before you add your images. If you wanted this stretched on here, see where it went off the grid, it's starting to tile itself over, which you can kind of start layering this thing back down. If you want to move this one, that's the bottom. So see the way that face is stretched. These out of the way. Now say I wanted to split this thing up, this face here, use this cut and sew method. I'm going to edit this outside, it doesn't really matter. Let me go to my edge, you see my edges right there. I am going to select both of those and go cut. Now what that did, it created two shells. So if you create that one over there, kind of map that one over there, if you wanted two different styles of that. Once you have them like this though, like if you've got an intricate object, if you wanted to like fillet these out in a different way, you can always go see what Maya will do with the layout. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just kind of made it big. Oh, I'm sorry, the unfold. Unfold. That kind of like straightened them up a little bit. And then if you go layout, basically it puts it back in the coordinate in a timely manner, or in a fashionably way that you can kind of scale down. Now, if you had two objects, like if you had sleeves of a shirt that you wanted to sew together, if you wanted this polygon to be a part of it, I am going to cut this out. So now it's its own piece, but I wanted to connect it over here. Notice it's finding the coordinating edge. I'm just going to select both of those edges and go cut and sew. Move and sew, I'm sorry. Now I moved it over there. So now I have that one part of it. This works for especially if you put another style of mapping on it. You can do a camera-based mapping, which basically takes the way the camera's pointed at it and puts the image on it. Now I already have the image on there, but if I didn't and I wanted to separate all these things out, I could kind of do it the same way, like select the top here, cut. Now it's made like a shell. You can take and put that somewhere. Then you can start cutting these polygons out and placing them where you want to. Now, if I were going to take this in Photoshop and want to doctor it up, you have your face right here, how your image is, object mode, and you would basically take a screenshot, a UV snapshot, and it saves it as a PNG. You save it to where you want to save it to a large size, and it comes through basically as just these white lines, like in the examples here. What I was showing you, like this as a screen, and then you screen those in Photoshop, and you can overlay. You can kind of work in Photoshop and Maya at the same time, basically updating your image as you work in Photoshop. So it's pretty powerful stuff. This is the biggest. That's kind of an overview of it. So if you're having trouble kind of figuring out how to work in this system, you'll notice with some of the planets you were doing at the top, it was pinching a little bit because of the actual polygons are so close together, and then they're spread out up here. They're not, if I add the image to this, let me find that. Could go and you could basically kind of select these maybe. Oh, I have a different shell. I am going to scale them in. You've also got only problem with that is you've got to find like this seam right here, make sure it's fine, but that is a way to manipulate, like especially like with these planets and stuff, to experiment and like cutting these polygons up. But yeah, so get used to the UV editor. Cut and sew, we'll be doing some projects I wanted to show this table project, which we'll be working on. I have all these different separate objects. They're all can be used as, that's a cylinder, so I could use and project a cylindrical map on it. This top here, let me go ahead and actually open up the UV editor, add the checkerboard to it. I'll just show you how screwed up initially everything comes through whenever you just slap the image on there. So if I were to slap, say, like a wooden image on there, it's going to look pretty decent right here because everything's not kind of stretched, and right here it's going to be really bad because everything's stretched here on these feet, and right here it's going to come across really bad because it's stretched across the top but not stretched across the bottom. So if you've got to go in there and kind of cut this thing up or apply the different UV maps to the different objects here to try to make them match up. So in other words, that checker pattern right there is different from this one right here. A way you could go about fixing that is, let's try to shrink that one down by applying a cylindrical map to that one. Kind of right off the bat helps. Yeah. So already it still kind of works whenever you start applying different maps. And you can apply projection maps to or the UV projection mapping to just faces. So in other words, if I did this top right here, I would probably just select these faces and just apply like a planar map to the face. So I'm selecting all the faces on the top. Not doing a ring select. Now with a planar map, you have different axes. I don't know if that's the right axis. Yeah, that's the wrong axis. There. So, and then I would just kind of scale this in to make that work. Scale it out a little bit, make it match the bottom. So whenever I go to apply my image on there, we have a proper mapping basically. So, okay, that's it for now. Just get used to opening up the UV editor and working in this style. Like I said, you know, I used to kind of use this thing kind of a floating panel, but I don't so much anymore. I just kind of dock it in there. I use my classic. Instead of using my UV editor as a floating dock, I kind of use the UV editor here because it brings up the toolkit over here too, which are pretty handy, which you may have seen me use whenever we were doing the images for like the posters. I kind of stretched them a little bit, and that's what I did. I selected the vertex tool, and was able to kind of manipulate just the vertex polygon. Oops, I'm actually stretching. In other words, I'm moving that vertex right there, and you'll see it move. Polygon's not moving, or the geometry's not moving, but the image on the geometry is moving. So then you get your edge, and then your face mode, and over here your scale and your rotate. So okay, well that's it for now. Yeah, we will reconvene back and probably work on this table here, separating out and making the image making the same image match each object on here, which is always a good exercise in UV mapping. So okay, thanks for watching.